an intercessor is like the wind. There are times when he rises up with bows and arrows and he fights. There are other times where he disappears. And so for 2 weeks, nobody sees you. And they say, where has he gone to? You are hiding because discernment has come. Not every battle is fought. Some are avoided. But if you don't have the weapon of discernment, you will not know what it takes to operate in those corridors. Ask those that God has commissioned. Their greatest strength, what makes them invincible, is the weapon of discernment. He says, as the wind bloweth, thou knowest not from whence it cometh or whence it goeth. He says, so are they that are born by the Spirit of God. You can go for some meetings. They ask you a question and you don't answer. You just do like this. Whether you are saying yes or no, they can't tell. Because that meeting is not your answer they are looking for. They just wanted to say you too spoke there, so that they will include you among people that will become victims. And so the Holy Ghost tells you your voice cannot be heard. And so although you couldn't escape the meeting, you came. When they are talking, you are just doing like this. You do like this until you go. They now want to probe and attack everybody that went for that meeting. They are doing voicing. When they check the whole voicing, your voice didn't appear. So God used discernment to teach you how to escape. And so you will see that you will be on that corridor changing things, yet you are invincible. Because now you have received the qualification to represent God in those corridors. You can't have such intelligence by studying in Harvard. You have such intelligence because you have disclosures from the realm of God. And when you start studying how civilizations are formed, you will discover that it is this same program that devils use to establish civilizations. This same program. You know, when Cain departed from the presence of God, the Bible says Cain began to pioneer a new civilization. We didn't know what happened. We didn't know how Cain came about that civilization, but when we saw the DNA of that civilization, we knew it was not consistent with God. Because territories reveal the essence of the spirits that inspired their creation. And so when we saw the texture of that civilization, we knew God was apart from it. We knew God was not involved in that civilization. It was later Paul began to teach us how spirits establish civilizations. And he began to tell us how principalities come first, then powers come, then rulers of the darkness of this world come, and then spiritual wickedness come. Because that is the ecclesia of the demonic realm. Like you said, the pattern of the Roman government. When they want to dominate a city, they send their agents there to colonize you so that they rule you in your own land. And so when you study this progression, you will see that principality, the word principality means first in rank. And what it means is that they enter a territory first. They are the ones who come to establish governance. Because that word is also the word alke. It's a word for authority. So principalities are princes, beings of authority that have the capacity to colonize territories. You would think it's just about first. It's not first in terms of numerical value. It's actually first in terms of governance. They are the ones who bring governance. If you study Colossians chapter 1 verse 15, when Paul was giving the hierarchy of creation, he said Jesus is first. He created all things. All things were created for him, both visible and invisible. He now went further to say, then you have thrones. That's when you will now know that thrones are not seats. They are creatures. And so the 24 elders are thrones. And so when you study the nature of thrones, thrones are princes that are invited to co-rule with God. Jesus was speaking to the 12 disciples. He said, at the end of time, he said, you will sit with me on 12 thrones to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. So there are people who have passed their ordination. And because of the extent to which they fulfill their ordination, God will invite them to exercise dominion and authority with him. So when you find creatures who graduate as overcomers to co-rule with God, they are called thrones. Now, after thrones, you have dominions. A dominion is a prince that is given legal authority over a territory. So a dominion is like a governor in the spirit realm. That's why when man was created and earth was given to him, man was called a dominion. He said, let them have dominion. And he went further to say the heavens belong to God. He said, but the earth he has given to the sons of men. So you cannot possess a territory until you are a dominion. And so a dominion is a prince that has authority over a territory. That's the realm we were created to function from. When we finish from earth and we pass the test of dominion, we will graduate to become thrones. Not every man will be a throne. But every man is supposed to be a dominion. Because God allocated the earth to us as our territory of rulership. That's how Paul rated the Kedar. It was after throne in Colossians 15 and 16 that Paul spoke about principalities. That means principalities are also princes, but they don't have territory to superintend over. But the job of principalities is that they take a territory. When they have secured the territory and colonized it, dominions come to take over. And when they take over, then establishment of new laws are created that become the culture of the people. Our forefathers didn't know that they were encountering spirits. And so when those spirits encountered them, what the spirits did was to write laws for them. Those laws are our culture now. And because we have those cultures, we are bound to worship them forever and ever until a superior priesthood comes. If we don't encounter God in light, we will encounter demons in darkness. And you know the way principalities work? When they show up, what they do is that they look, the devil can't give any gift. It's primarily a being of destruction. They are finding out what their weaknesses are. And so some of them love money. Some of them love flamboyance. Some of them love women. The job of the principality is to create a system where all of these things are available. And as they give those things to them, they draw their attention from God and they begin to pursue those things. Now, when they pursue those things to a level, their appetites become bigger. And the more the appetites become big, the more of it they want. So the principality will now come for a deeper negotiation. If you want more, then you have to enter a covenant. But he started by checking their abilities. Now, those abilities are supposed to be the abilities harnessed on the altar of priesthood. But because they didn't have priesthood in light, the devil initiated priesthood in darkness. Those of us who are apostolic in nature, we are creatures of authority. One of our predominant abilities is faith. We can make declarations and break territories open. When the principalities come, they will know that your weakness will be pride. So they will create a system that anchor on your pride, and you will be driven away from God because of your pride. The job of the principality is to make sure he establishes quadrants of such people. And when he has established them, these people will now give them legality to establish their dominion in the territory. Because they didn't have the original dominion. The dominion belonged to the men, but the men have to give clearance. But they need to find out where they can negotiate with the men. And when they have negotiated and the clearance is given, then they begin to establish their dominion. So what happens is that when a principality finishes its job, a power now comes. What you call an addiction is not an addiction. It's the operation of a power. It binds you to that thing that has drawn you away from God. And so when a power binds you, then a ruler of darkness comes. The word ruler of darkness is Cosmos Kratos. They are magistrate that creates laws in the cosmos. So what they do is that thing that is an addiction becomes a law. That's when, even if you want to break out, you can't anymore. You will need deliverances for it to happen. But even at that time, it has become a principle that runs your life. Because a ruler of darkness has come. And when they see that your job with them is over, then spiritual wickedness comes. Those are called ponerias. Their job is to afflict. So the lady began, first of all, pursuing money and going into harlotry and thinks she's doing well. After a while, she has HIV. The guy who was supposed to be a prophet thought he was making money and enjoying women. After a while, he is publicly disgraced and he dies of depression. So he can never fulfill his ordination anymore. Because if you fail, you will enter the ordinations of darkness. Meanwhile, these beings don't stop there. All of the things I've explained here is where they make agents from. Agents are the puppets of demonic spirits. They use them to fulfill their agenda. They send them all over. But amongst agents, they select a few who are specially gifted and empower them, and they are called witches and wizards. A witch is a being that has a man or a woman that have the power to cast spells. So when a principality comes to Zambia, for example, and discover their prophets here, he will have many agents here that pursue immorality, pursue flamboyant things. When he's using them, he will now raise some of them to become witches. Those witches will cast spells into the atmosphere so that those things will thrive. So you will not know why a move of faith, false prophets will begin. You will not know why a move of seduction begin. Some have become casters of spells. And he won't stop there. He will raise some to become warlocks. You know, those of you who watch medieval movies, you will see how kingdoms are formed. They are formed through sorcery. Most nations, including some of the leading nations of the... How many of you have watched Merlin? How many of you have watched Merlin? You see that the prince thinks it's his bow and arrow that is winning battle. He didn't know that the young man who was following him was the warlock. When he meets the dragon, he addresses him as young warlock. The guy has the power to cast spell. He has the power to create victory, even where there is no victory. So that at the end of the day, they will achieve Albion, a territory where sorcery and witchcraft will be allowed to be practiced free of charge. That's their goal. So the reason they are preserving the life of the prince is to achieve Albion. That's how territories are formed in darkness if the priesthood of light is not established. And some will grow from warlocks to become sages. A sage is a teacher in darkness. Those ones have the power to impart those abilities. So our fathers here will tell you that those days somebody can come to you and say, cut the grass and give me. If you give him, he will say some things, rub his hand on you, and scorpion will never sting you again. He has the power to transfer demonic powers. So he has now been trained in darkness. That's how these people influence what you call the marketplace. That's how they influence what you call government. So the reason most you go to certain nations, the foundation of governance is corruption, is because some sages and warlocks spoke it into the foundation. So even if a good man comes to leadership, that power will bend his will because it was rooted as a heritage of that territory. You now go to another territory, they are very innovative. Like where we came from in the Middle East. You see wisdom, you see excellence, and you say, how come these people are like this? You think this is the best. You now go under, you see oppression and violence. What gives them joy is to spill blood. And so anywhere they go to, blood is spilled like water. You go to another territory, you say these are scientifically inclined. They are learned people. Why is Africa not like this? You now discover that there is perversion and immorality. So what they teach them is that sex is exercise. And it ruins the souls of people. So on one side, you see poverty and backwardness. On another side, although there is excellence, but you see violence. On another side, although there is scientific inclinations, intelligence, but you see corruption, you see lawlessness, you see immorality. The signatures are different depending on the laws that are written. So before you go to those territories, you must have a priesthood in light that can uproot those foundations. Otherwise, you can go to America and be a successful businessman, but you'll be an immoral person. Because the priesthood does not negate financial prosperity, but it negates purity of the soul. And so you are excelling, but a point comes to become godless. And if you are there for 5 years, you will start wondering, what do I need God for? Because the system, the law that is written in that atmosphere is that the higher you go, the more irrelevant God is to you. And you will not know what is happening. And then you are insulting those in Africa. You say they are backward. See how poor they are. You don't know what is going on. A point will come when, if you are there for 15 years, you will not even know how to say Jesus is Lord. Because something has gone wrong with your soul. In fact, a point will come, you start feeling, you say, I love a man. And they say, what do you mean? You say, that's how I feel. I live by how I feel. And you see a man say he loves a man. He didn't know that he's a victim of the demonic priesthood. Meanwhile, there's a lot of advancement in civilization, but the heart is dark. And then you come to this side of Africa. You are highly religious. You are praying. You are fasting. But you are irrelevant in the marketplace. Because you don't have the intelligence to contend there. And even those who are in your government, corruption eats their soul up. The money that belongs to the nation, 5 people share it. And they think wisdom is to go to Dubai and sleep in 5-star hotel. So they are backward mentally because of demonic intelligence. All of those things are codes written into different territories because civilizations are formed from the roots of darkness. And so when God is calling us into priesthood, is to revamp the foundation of civilization. It's not just to succeed in business. It's to change the laws in the marketplace. It's not just to succeed in government, it's to change the laws in the government. So when a man who carries a priesthood enters the government, he will not just rule well and bring advancement in civilization. He will change the laws. And a day will come when this same government that if you don't involve in corruption, you will not win, will change. The order will change because a new priesthood has been established. So beyond having a president that is interested in education and interested in developing the people, you need a president that has the power to change the code. So that when another political dispensation comes, what it takes to go into that office would have changed. The people who have money to bribe, they will say, keep your money, we don't need it. We need a righteous man. When you see things happening, know that a new priesthood has come. Because it's no longer about money during election anymore. What is your manifesto? What is your plan for the people? People start thinking differently because the atmosphere has changed. You know, most of us don't know what we are contending with. Sir, what we are fighting is an age-long darkness. The foundation is deep. This is why Sunday morning Christianity can't help it. We are interested in a large auditorium. So people gather. We are running 5 services. And we teach for 30 minutes. Is it a teaching of 30 minutes that will raise men who can change the corruption in the market? Is this a teaching of 30 minutes that will raise men who can change the foundation of government? No, that's not the pattern the apostles brought. They knew how deep darkness was. So they needed to sit with them, to cook them before they are sent. Before you go to, see, there are certain men in government that if they tell you to do corruption, you will not have the guts to say no. Because of the weight of darkness they bring to you. You know if you say no, you are doomed. Unless you have something superior to what they carry. For you to look at them in the eye. Do you think it was a joke when Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, we will not bow? If you collide with a king of Babylon, you dare not say no. Before you can look at that king in the face and say, I will not, you must have something that is more ranking than his priesthood. And the problem we have is that we have not raised men who have priesthood in light. We bring them to church from January to December and we are prophesying breakthrough. This week is your week. Next week you will prosper. It's a joke. The moment they enter the marketplace, they are swept off. Even most of us who are succeeding, we are succeeding on the plane of compromise. When you check, somebody testifies, I just bought a new land. I started a new oil business. Go and check. most of the transactions are full of compromise. You have few men who are wielding the scepter of righteousness because we don't know that our kingship functions to the degree of the efficacy of our priesthood. This is a journey of the spirit, and it's one that will take all of you. When Abraham sat at the gate of Mamre, the transactions he was carrying out were deep transactions. Now, when God encountered Abraham, we saw that he gleaned some secrets from the mountains of God. And one of the secrets we found that Abraham stumbled upon was the mystery of altars. Because the moment he encountered God, the Bible revealed to us from Genesis chapter 12 to verse 6, as he got into the promised land, he erected an altar. So Abraham recognized immediately the place of spirit interactions if there will be dominion on the face of the earth. It will be impossible to subdue the earth realm if you don't have a vital interaction with the heavenlies. And so it was from the life of Abraham that we saw the predominance of altars. In fact, in Genesis 12 verse 7, as he moved to Bethel, he raised another altar. When he relocated to Mamre in Genesis 13 verse 18, he raised another altar. And so when you follow the navigation of Abraham, the tents departed, but the altars remained. And we saw that after many generations, when Jacob came back, it was one of the altars of Abraham he had an encounter with the heavens. So Abraham caught something in the spirit, that the technology of altars created a connection with heaven. And so long as a man is connected to the heavens, that man has dominion on the earth. So dominion on the earth is not a product of intellectual strategies. Dominion on the earth is a product of interactions in the heaven and the discernments that are produced on account of those interactions. And so when you find men who have superior mindset, it's not necessarily because of IQ. It's actually because of heightened discernment. So when you study the life of Abraham, one of the things he learned in his encounter with God is the way of ascension through altars. And so Abraham literally lived on altars. If you notice, most of the things Abraham did were a product of direct instructions given to him from the places of encounters. He didn't initiate his first encounter with God, but he knew what to do to keep the presence of God. So after the first encounter, he created an altar, and that altar became a vent, a gangway from heaven to earth. So he knew how to access the realm of God. And so for Abraham, his relationship with God became a progressive journey. It was no longer something that happened once in a while because God chose to visit him. It became something that he could transact through a deliberate spiritual process and a protocol initiated by the intelligence he had on account of his encounters. Now, after he encountered Melchizedek, you saw that Melchizedek validated that thing that he gleaned when he encountered God. And so Melchizedek showed him that for you to dominate in the marketplace of nations, you must always have encounters with the spirit of Elohim. And so he had to meet Melchizedek before meeting the king of Sodom. And when Abraham left Melchizedek, that became his way of life. Now, in Genesis chapter 18, you now notice that when God was passing, God didn't need to visit. Abraham recognized him. The Bible said 3 men were passing. But when Abraham saw them, he said, these are not men. Although they carry the similitude of men, he said, this one look like Elohim. And Abraham said, please drop back. Come into the house and let me wet you. Because you are stressed by the hunger, the drought of the field. The people said, no, we will not. He insisted. And he dragged them into the house. And he fed them, he washed them. And when they were going, God now revealed himself and began to talk to him about what looked like a challenge. He said, in the next time of life, when I visit again, your wife Sarah will bear a child. Abraham began to address him as Lord. Even though Sarah laughed, God said, why did she laugh? She said, no, I didn't laugh. No, he said, but you laughed. But don't worry, that laugh that you laugh will become the name of the child you will bear. Because now, you think you are laughing because you are doubting me, but I'm bringing laughter into your life. And when he was going, Abraham now followed. And he began to tell Abraham issues that border on kings and nations again. I'm going to Sodom. The Sodom that you delivered, now I'm going to destroy it. Because like you said, when the king of Sodom came, he came with a dimension, a demonic order. And that order had affected the culture of the people. You see that Sodom was the headquarters of perversion. What you call LGBTQ today had its root in Sodom. And because the king of Sodom received his authority from his demonic priesthood, the impact of his priesthood will have to shape the culture of the territory. And so when they engaged in perversion, it was an act of worship to the spirit that powered the king of Sodom. Because worship is not a song. Worship is actually a declaration of allegiance to a spirit. You can do it through a song, you can do it through a lifestyle. But in the nation of Sodom, perversion was the dimension of worship that ascended. And this time, the iniquity of Sodom had ascended to heaven. And God was going to destroy it. And he had to tell Abraham, although once upon a time you had to save them because of Lot, now I'm going to destroy it. And Abraham knew that if he didn't do anything about it, the nation will be destroyed. Now, if kings of the earth are coming against Sodom, you can raise an army. But when the king of heaven is coming, you need intercession. Imagine if all Abraham knew was to train soldiers. He would have been handicapped. But this time around, he has understood how to negotiate not only in the table of nations, but in the tables of Zion. And they say, far be it from you, God of heaven, that the righteous judge will destroy both the righteous and the iniquity and the evil. What if you find 50 righteous men? And God told him, if I find 50 righteous men, I will spare the land. Abraham negotiated until he reached 10. He assumed that Lot learned something, but unfortunately, Lot only learned principles and strategies. He didn't know the way of ascension. That's why in this conference, in addition to the principles and the strategies you will learn, you must learn the way of ascension. Because Abraham could fight on the right and on the left. On the right was his ascension to heaven. On the left was his negotiation power in the table of nations. And so if we don't bring the two together, we will not be relevant. That's why Lot was always a victim. You ask yourself, why is this guy always the victim? Because he didn't have ascensions. He didn't know how to travel to navigate Zion. But Abraham knew that gateway. So when he had to do with the nations of the world, he had an army that he trained. When he has to do with heaven, he had technologies of priesthood where he could go to the heights of the heaven. So when God created man and created his kingdom, the kingdom of God is not for Christians. You know, they were called Christians in Antioch because they saw they looked like Christ. But the kingdom of God is for priests. That means if you are not a priest, although you have all the blessings of God, you cannot enjoy it. Because on one side is what God has done for you. But over and above what God has done for you, there is what God is doing in you, and there's what God will do through you. It is in priesthood that we receive what God is doing in you and through you. The finished works of Christ is what God has done for you. But when you come to priesthood through your interaction with the Holy Ghost, God will begin to work in you so that God can work with you. And many don't know this. And so when we operate as Christians and not priests, we will keep singing what Jesus has done, but we will not have what it takes to manifest it. Meanwhile, the battle of existence is a battle of evidence. The things you talk about, can you demonstrate it? So priesthood comes to help us demonstrate what Jesus has made available to us. And that is why from the beginning, the plan of God was priesthood. In Genesis chapter 2 from verse 15, after God created the man, Genesis 1:26, Genesis 2:7, put him in the Garden of Eden. In Genesis 2:15, God told him, dress the garden and keep it. Those are two vital words. The word dress is the word yada. And that word means cultivate the garden. And the word keep is the word shama. That word means to defend it. So these two words in the original sense is priesthood and guardianship. So on one side, you need to have what it takes to be relevant in the territory. On another side, you need to have what it takes to keep the territory connected to heaven so that it doesn't lose its relevance. So when he created Adam, he had priesthood in mind. After man fell, God came, introduced priesthood to Abraham. After man was taken in slavery, when God encountered Moses again, in Genesis 19 from verse 4 to verse 6, he introduced priesthood again. He said, see how I've delivered you by my mighty hand. I took you on eagle's wings so that I will make you a kingdom of priests. I came to make priests because only by priesthood can there be connection to heaven and there will be dominion on the face of the earth. And that pattern never changed. Even after Jesus came and resurrected, Peter came and reiterated this same emphasis. In 1 Peter 2:9, he said, you are a chosen generation. You are a royal priesthood. God's own special people called forth to showcase his excellency. And in Revelation chapter 1 verse 6, John reiterated it. He said, unto him that washed us and made us kings and priests unto God. So we were designed to function in the kingdom of God as priests. And as priests, we must first of all know how to keep interaction with the heavens, and then by extension, know how to apply that interaction to dominate the earth realm. Because if we don't, those who have demonic priesthood will dominate this realm.